This conference, this convening would not be possible without a strong and well-informed and caring curatorial hand. A curatorial committee composed of curators Ngaire Blankenberg, who is the founder of the Institute for Creative Repair. When I heard that, my heart just went, yes, we creatives need repair. We've been through a lot, you know? Institutional systemic oppression, isolation, erasure, that's a whole nother dissertation. Previously, she was with the Smithsonian. She's a powerhouse of the arts sector on the continent and beyond. She was a co-curator with Emmanuel Casero, who was the president of the Musée de Quai Branly, Jacques Chirac in Paris, and curatorial assistant Kefilwe Suisa. They developed the program for reimagining heritage archives and museums today, tomorrow, in conjunction with a steering committee formed by people at IFAS and amongst other stakeholders. Ngaire is going to give us a keynote address right now. And I want to personally thank her and thank everybody who's been working tirelessly over the last year and a half to make sure that it happens. Ngaire, it is our pleasure to welcome you to the stage that you made happen.
Welcome, welcome, and thank you to all for being here, and thanks to IFAS for inviting myself and Monsieur Kazehu, and I want to give a big up to Molemo Moeoloa, who was with us in those early stages to help you shape this conference. So I'd like to say here that the remarks I'm going to say are mine, and they don't reflect the position of IFAS in relation to this conference or anything else. So, like many of you, my mind has been consumed over the last 130 days by the ongoing genocide in Gaza. The scale of the destruction, the cruelty, the impunity, the justifications, the deflections have left me, and I'm sure many of you, in tears of rage and impotence and disbelief. Of course, I'm also aware of the atrocities in Sudan and DRC, and these also make me sick to my stomach. But what is happening in Gaza has particular resonance for me and for this conference. My whole education about museums and their role in society has been founded on two sources: Holocaust museums and the discourse of the role of museums in the archive after the defeat of apartheid in the 90s, thanks to many of you who are here today. Holocaust museums, which over the last 50 years have become tolerance museums, human rights museums, and others, taught me the importance of memory when it comes to never again. The people behind those museums were activists and they were survivors. They were the ones that showed us the possibility of museums and archives, not only as repositories of past, of collection storehouses, but as an active agent in shaping the present and the future for the better. They were the ones who convinced so many of us and so many people to open up long-sealed wounds, to speak out, to gift us their pain and their testimonies as a prophylactic for the hope of a better world. I learned about this first through reading from a distance, but later, my conversation with Holocaust survivors as I documented stories for the Canadian Museum for Human Rights 15 years ago left an indelible mark on me, personally and professionally. I remember speaking to Bronya Singeiser, then in her 70s, who had spoken up many times before at schools and meetings, and yet in front of me, she cried like it was yesterday as she showed me the tattoos on her arm. The trauma was still so present, but she made herself at great personal cost tell over and over again about what she went through, what she witnessed, and what she experienced. She did it because she knew the price of silence. Robbie Wiseman told me about being one of the enfants terribles, a teenager who barely escaped the gas chambers of Buchenwald, broken mentally and physically, who, along with other children who survived the camps, was returned to France as an orphan to rebuild his life, but was wild, he said, as he wrestled with the murder of his family and what he had endured. He was termed a psychopath and considered irredeemable, but he wasn't. He taught me that it takes only one or two people's support to heal. He taught me the importance of strong supportive relationships for resilience. Both Bronya and Robbie, alongside 238 other people, told us their stories because they believed in museums and that a museum could be a place of healing for themselves and for others. Like many of you, my interest in museums was never academic. It was about ensuring that there was a space for me, my family, my ancestors in the knowledge schemes of the world. It was about the value of memory and reflection and never again. It was about the power to define and decide, a belief in a better future. And in that well-worn cliche, those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it. It was always personal, and it was always political. So here we are in 2024. The Holocaust museums have decried Hamas's attack on Israel, but have been largely silent about the death and the destruction that the Netanyahu government is wreaking in Gaza, incredulously following the playbook of all genocides, whose definition and stages we know precisely because of people like Ralph Lemkin and Gregory Stanton delving into the archives of the Holocaust, among others, and finding and communicating its patterns, often displayed in these very same museums that now stand silent. The state of Israel has tied its entire existence indivisibly to never again, and has invested in heritage, archaeology, archives, and museums to anchor its identity in a way not dissimilar to how the European powers invested in the tropical, colonial, and ethnographic museums of the 19th and 20th centuries to establish and justify their own expansionist objectives. Those who have been at the forefront of remembering trauma for repair are now instrumentalizing that memory to inflict unbelievable harm. History is being repeated in the 21st century by the victims of the worst atrocities of the 20th century. Memory, personal and collective, has become not a tool for healing, but a weapon for revenge. So what do we do now? In South Africa, the paradoxical power of culture and heritage as both weapon of oppression and tool of resistance is something ingrained in all of us. We know how we were diminished and traumatized by the way in which our art, our spirituality, our philosophy, and our culture was denied or destroyed, relegated to natural history, folklore, or witchcraft. We also know how our Pachla and our Gadat, our Miriam Makeba, our Madu Art Ensemble, our Mogani Wali Soroti, and now our Amapiano, our Taila, our Zegs Bantwini, and our Esther Machlango are what and who keeps us sane, smiling, and connected. It is something that you in France also know well. Your investment in your writers, your artists, your makers, and your cultural and heritage institutions at home and abroad is the highest in the world. You are an exemplar in recognizing the importance of culture and identity, in education, in international relations, and in soft power. And for us here today, from civil society, private sector, academics, cultural workers, activists, and government, we share the belief in the power of culture, but we are not naive. The one who throws the stone forgets. The one who is hit remembers forever. The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. We are here at this conference to reimagine heritage, archives, and museums for today and tomorrow. This is not happening in a vacuum. We watch the genocide in Gaza unfolding through social media, disintermediated by the knowledge authorities, the curators of the Western news networks, getting to know real people living through the trauma hour after deadly hour. Even from thousands of miles away, we are bearing witness to the relentless bombardment and its consequences on people we have come to know. The geopolitics of the world is reconfiguring, as we saw at the recent BRICS conference. New alliances are being formed and unformed. 68 countries are going through elections this year. The global political landscape of 2025 is likely to be considerably different than 2023. We in the global south are of the world and in the world, acting on an international stage, claiming the same rights to the global as you have always done in the West. In our sector, the exciting movements for restitution that seemed to be taking off a few years ago are now stalling, action being replaced by research, promises qualified by bureaucracy. At home, we are experiencing a systemic disinvestment of all of our infrastructure, including our cultural infrastructure. Arts, culture, and heritage have been deprioritized, and we see in the most unequal country in the world how increasing racial and economic disparities manifest in our private versus public cultural ecosystem. It is a time of polarization, upheaval, gross inequality, corruption, censorship, climate emergency, and war. It is sometimes hard to believe, in the word of Arundhati Roy, that another world is possible, that what we say here will even matter. I'm under no illusion that we will change the world in the next few days, but I still believe in what I learned from Bronia and Robbie. Silence is complicity, relationships breed resilience, museums, archives, and spaces like them can heal. We have stated that the aim of the conference is to develop a framework for a new relational ethic between Southern Africa and France, and more broadly between the rest of Africa and Europe, and set priorities for future cooperation between our regions. It is also an opportunity for us as Africans to learn from one another from a place of power and possibility. We borrowed the phrase, as Monsieur Martinon said, relational ethic, from the title of Falwin Sarr and Bénédicte Savoy's report, commissioned by Macron in 2017 on the restitution of African cultural heritage from France. In their report, they acknowledged the incommensurable losses and suffering arising from the theft of our objects, but not only objects, from our reserves of energy, creative resources, reservoirs of potential, forces engendering alternative figures and forms of the real, forces of germination. They recognize how this process of colonial conquest has forever altered, or as they say, irremediably trampled upon how we in Africa and you in Europe participate in the world. Nevertheless, they believe in the possibility of a new form of relating to one another based on acknowledgement, accountability, apology, compensation, and, quote, reinvented relational modalities that are qualitatively improved, which are just big words to say that although we may be different, we are still equally knowledgeable, equally modern, and equally professional. So, it is in the spirit of at least an attempt to set the stage for new relational models and then for concrete next steps that we have framed this conference. Although we have many people from France in the audience, bienvenue, many of you have preferred to listen. We welcome listening, but we also welcome conversation. We cannot have repair without engagement, without you understanding us, but also us understanding you. So we invite all of you to speak when we open the floor after each panel, in the breaks, and afterward. This goes too, of course, for our brothers and sisters from the rest of the continents. South Africans are a talkative bunch, maybe a little self-centered, but we have much to learn from you. Thank you for being here. Today, our first session is about reimagining museums and archives for a new era. This will be primarily about South African museums and archives, but hopefully there will be lessons there for French museums too, especially those with African collections. Tomorrow, we focus on restitution, material and epistemic. We have structured the day not only to discuss the imperatives of restitution predominantly from a Southern and an African point of view and to take stock of where we are today, but also how to discuss how restitution is only one, albeit necessary, step in the reconfiguration of relations between the West, former colonial powers, and ourselves as Africans. Part of this means to understand what culture and heritage is according to us, to understand the limits of current professional practice when it comes to identifying, classifying, documenting, and caring for collections, and also to understand the centrality of spirituality when it comes to our heritage, which extends far beyond the confines of the museum and archive and is embodied in many other forms of culture. On Wednesday, we look outwards. We think about our publics and whether or not we remain relevant, and we consider our sustainability and our precarity. Budgets are moral documents. Allocation of money denotes commitment. Who's willing to pay for culture? What are new models that will work in our context of weak government support, growing inequality, new technology, and flourishing youth-led creativity? At the time of the art fair, we also ask, what is the role of private collectors in the preservation of heritage? Does the art market simply continue the extractive impulses of colonialism, replacing foreign museums with corporate corridors and private mansions? How can we work better for more generative and sustainable cultural ecosystems? So I look forward to listening and learning from you all and to discovering if we do indeed have un monde en commun in which we are all equal, all agents, and all committed to creative repair. Thank you.